So the third Sonic movie came out recently, and with all the hype surrounding the movie, I've been talking to a lot of different people about Sonic-related stuff. Topics like who the best character is, which is objectively Shadow by the way, I don't make the rules, to things like fond memories with the franchise, and naturally what their favorite game is. I got a lot of the common answers, like Unleashed, SA2, Frontiers, and all that, but there was one game that popped up every once in a while that caught me off guard. There were a handful of people that said their favorite game was Sonic 06, and a lot of other people I chatted with talked about the game favorably. For some reason, this really stood out to me. Sonic games are no stranger to revisionist opinions. The general consensus around most of the games has shifted multiple times over the years, but it always seemed like Sonic 06 was the one exception to that rule. For years, 06 has been lambasted as this putrid abomination, a game that was almost responsible for killing the franchise and changing its direction for decades following. A game that broke into my house and beat up my entire family. Okay, maybe not that last part. But here we are in the year 2025, after years of this game being the punching bag of both Sonic fans and the general gaming audience, and now all of a sudden I'm encountering people saying they like it, some even going as far as to call it their favorite. Over the days and weeks that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about these conversations, mostly because I have Sonic brain rot, but something else about them continued to spin around in my mind. What were these people able to see in this game that's been lambasted for the better part of 2 decades? Is Sonic the Hedgehog for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 some hidden masterpiece that's been unfairly treated? Well, let's not kid ourselves, the game is still a piece of shit. But the more I thought about this topic and read into the wide variety of opinions on this game, I came to some conclusions. Conclusions that not only slightly changed the way I look at Sonic 06, but also gaming discourse as a whole. Basically, you could say that Sonic 06 helped me reach a new gaming enlightenment. The quality of Sonic 06 as a game is pretty well known at this point. The game falls apart if you breathe on it the wrong way, basic mechanics don't work properly, and the load times are so long that you can beat a whole other Sonic game in the amount of time you're stuck waiting in between missions. The game is pretty rough, all things considered, but underneath all that, I think the game does have quite a few redeeming qualities that don't get brought up enough. I think the level design is actually quite solid, especially for Sonic's campaign. When everything works properly, the game has this really nice sense of flow. Whether it's bouncing between enemies, dodging debris being launched out of a giant fire tornado, to grinding on pockets of wind, a lot of levels are really exhilarating to play through. There's a lot of optional pathways and hidden goodies scattered around these stages, which makes exploring them a little more rewarding. Even now I'm discovering new pathways I didn't know existed. I also think it's really neat how each of the 3 main playable characters feels different from one another. Sonic is obviously the base, so he's the simplest of the 3, but he still has a few gameplay mechanics that are unique to him, like the gems or the Mach speed sections. The gems admittedly are a little hit or miss, partially because half of them don't even work, but the ones that do work are really interesting and allow you to interact with levels in different ways, albeit if unintentionally. It's such a simple concept, but having these more linear sections where Sonic just says fuck it and goes full throttle is a really fun idea for a level set piece. And in a few levels, it really sells the stakes they're trying to portray at that given moment. Shadow being more combat focused makes sense for his character, especially considering it was a big part of his own game, and it gives his levels this more methodical feeling compared to Sonic. The different chaos powers are a really unique idea that have really only come back recently. We always see Shadow use them across the series in cutscenes and whatnot, so it's really cool to actually use a couple of them here. The different vehicles are pretty clunky, but they do make for unique gameplay scenarios that you don't normally get in a Sonic game, like skating across the waters of Wave Ocean, or chasing and gunning down a runaway train on a motorcycle, or being crushed from off-screen for no reason. Silver has always been the most interesting to me out of the 3 main characters. While he is noticeably slower than the other 2, his psychokinesis abilities really change the way you interact with both stages and enemies. Being able to use objects in the environment like boxes or boulders to either attack enemies or even assist in platforming is such a unique idea. He's able to interact with the environment in a way no other character can, which sets his campaign apart from the other 2. He can also launch you into the stratosphere. Man, why can't I do that in-game? A lot of the ideas could be implemented better, but having so many little gameplay options that are unique to this game gives it its own identity, apart from being a broken mess. And if improved upon, they could make for a functionally fantastic Sonic game. In fact, you can see just how good these ideas could be in a better implemented game in Chaos X's Project 06. Project 06 is a fan game that aims to recreate the levels of Sonic 06 in Unity, and make it actually good. It features various improvements over the base game, from visual upgrades, moveset adjustments, and there's even new power-ups for all three characters that basically act as super forms. There's a lot of really small changes that make the game stand out from the original. For one, Sonic's friends have almost completely new movesets that make them way more fun to play. Tails, for example, has his SA1 spin attack, Rouge is able to kick things alongside using her bombs, Amy is pretty much a completely different character, and Omega's attacks are actually able to hit things now. Silver is easily the best improvement in this game. He's a smidge faster than his base game counterpart, even getting this little levitation move when you reach top speed. And he has some other extra moves that make him a lot more fun to play, like this orb attack that can be used to stun enemies or outright kill them when upgraded. And he also has this cool little dash you can unlock that's really fun to mess around with. Overall, Project 06 is a vast improvement over the base game, and it gives us a peek into a reality where Sega gave the game the time it needed to reach its full potential. I bring this project up not only because it showcases how the ideas of the base game could have been implemented if they were given a better time frame, but I also believe that this game is a part of the reason Sonic 06 has started to become looked upon more favorably nowadays. That might sound kind of odd at first, since it's a fan game first and foremost, but hear me out for a second and you might be able to see where I'm coming from. Let's get a little philosophical. So get this, Sonic 06 is 19 years old this year. I think I just aged 5 years saying that out loud. But because this game is so old, there's a large subsect of Sonic fans that grew up with it or got into the series with this game. And I'm actually one of them. I remember renting and playing the shit out of this game growing up, and I absolutely loved it. I had no frame of reference for what a bad or broken game was back then. It never clicked with me that core aspects of the game just didn't work. I just thought it was hard and I was bad at it. I can clearly remember playing Shadow's Wave Ocean and getting stuck in one of the hovercrafts at the end of the stage. Like, the game just wouldn't let me exit and I'd drown if it blew up. So instead of thinking, these vehicles aren't acting like they have in other stages, something must have glitched out or broken, I thought it was just part of the stage and I rolled with it. I got a game over because these things control like ass, and I was too stupid to recognize that they worked as intended the second time I got there. But that experience has stuck with me for years. I'm telling you this not only because I think it's really funny, but also because it highlights how differently we can perceive things when we're younger. For all of its faults, Sonic 06 is conceptually a pretty cool game. I know the whole ambition and passion thing is a big meme among the Sonic community nowadays, but I do think that's a big reason as to why I gravitated to it so much, even while having access to much better games like Unleashed or Generations. This game blew my mind as a kid. For one, it has the most playable characters out of any Sonic game to date. I thought it was so cool that I could not only play as Sonic, Shadow, Silver, but also Tails, Knuckles, Amy, all these vastly different characters that I'd come to love through shows like Sonic X and other Sonic games all here in one place. There's a lot of vastly different level themes in this game, from the calm beaches of Wave Ocean, the post-apocalyptic hellscape of Crisis City and Flame Core, the cold ice-covered mountains of White Acropolis, to the chaotic winds and waterfalls of Kingdom Valley. The scope of this game was massive for a little JP. It felt like anything was possible in this game, and I loved getting into a new level just to see what other places I get to explore, or where the story would end up going. I was captured by the story of this game for very similar reasons. I thought it was so cool to see my favorite characters explore these different areas across time and space, while uncovering a greater mystery and fighting each other multiple times, only to all come together at the end to fight towards a common goal. I didn't have time to think about how dumb the romance subplot between Sonic and Elise is, or how Blaze being here makes no sense considering her background in Rush, or how Silver sitting on the beach contemplating the value of morality versus duty is so out of left field for a Sonic game. I was way too busy getting hyped watching Shadow roundhouse kick Silver in the back of the head, or seeing him take off his inhibitor rings to body all the Mephiles clones in the hypest cutscene in the franchise, or watching Mephiles then turn around and fucking kill Sonic. There's so many moments across this game that stuck with me for years, and now that I'm older I can appreciate a lot of other aspects about it, at least conceptually. While the romance between Sonic and Elise is really weird, I think the idea of their relationship is actually pretty solid. Sonic is this character that's supposed to be the physical embodiment of freedom, so I think having him influence a princess, who traditionally live more rigid and traditional lifestyles, to be more open and free with her desires is a good idea for a story, and I think it could have worked a lot better without the romance angle. Now that I've played games like SA2, Heroes, and Shadow, I really appreciate how Shadow's campaign builds on his story from those games, while also testing and pushing him forward as a character. Silver is basically Trunks from Dragon Ball, so that already makes him cool in my eyes. But his wonder of seeing a world that hasn't been ravaged by Iblis, contrasted with his desire to prevent that future from happening by killing Sonic, is an interesting conflict. The story being this interconnected time travel plot is really ambitious. As a kid, it made me interested in trying out the different character campaigns to see where it all went, and while it does lead to a few plot holes here and there, it also lends itself to some really fun and creative set pieces and plot beats. Having all of the characters team up in the last story to run through a decaying time and space to gather the Chaos Emeralds to revive a dead Sonic is such a raw set piece. Even if it does lead to ew! I don't bring all of this up to write off my enjoyment of the game as, oh, well, I was just a dumb kid, so I wasn't able to look at the game more critically, but rather to highlight that younger, naive mindset did have an effect on how I experienced the game. As kids, we generally have more time to kill on a game, and less choice on what games you could play at any given moment. So we had to find a way to get around a game's flaws as we continued to dump more and more time into the few games we had access to. Those hours I spent bashing my head against a wall trying to beat the first silver boss has led up to now where I can beat the boss in about 10 seconds with no issue. The same is true for most of the game. I've gotten to a point where I can play through most stages and avoid all the bullshit moments. Keyword most. I'm not trying to say that just because you can adapt around a game's flaws means the game is suddenly good or expertly designed, but should the enjoyment that comes from that experience with a game be written off? I don't think so. I think that Sonic 06 is a fundamentally flawed game, and I still enjoy playing Sonic 06, are both statements that can be true at the same time. I believe that a big part of the reason this game is seen in a much more favorable light nowadays is because the people that grew up playing it over and over again are able to share their experiences with the game, which, when you think about it, is a pretty common occurrence. I think most of us can think of at least one game we played the shit out of as a kid despite it not being very good, and still like to go back to every now and then nowadays. I mean, just how many half-baked movie or TV show tie-in games are there? You totally played the B-movie game on Wii, don't you lie to me. Some people call these types of games guilty pleasures, but personally speaking, I don't think there's anything wrong with enjoying a game in spite of its flaws, and it's much easier to accept a game for what it is when you have a lot more free time to bash your head against a wall and learn the game inside and out. This romanticized view of 06 is further enforced by the fact that the game isn't available on modern hardware. The game was delisted from digital storefronts in 2010, in an effort to improve Sonic's brand image at the time. And while it's true that it was relisted on the Xbox Marketplace sometime later, the game wasn't backwards compatible with either the Xbox One or the Xbox Series consoles, so the amount of people who could actually take advantage of that was pretty slim, and that was before the Xbox Marketplace was taken down for good in 2024. So the only way you can experience the game nowadays without seeking out a used Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3 is either through emulation, which for these two consoles requires a pretty expensive computer to get running properly, or through a fan project like Project 06. What this means is that less people are experiencing 06 as it was released back in 2006. Even if you are able to emulate it properly, some of the issues like the long load times can be mitigated if not outright removed. Then you have things like Project 06, which is just flat out a better version of the game, so much so that playing it makes it easy to forget just how rough the base game is. Last year I replayed 06 in preparation for a video ranking all of the Sonic hard modes, and booting up that game for the first time in over a decade was like a slap in the face after playing Project 06 so many times. It's crazy just how much smoother controls and just overall less jank can completely change the way the same level design is experienced, not to mention all the other little bells and whistles Project 06 lets you play around with. At a certain point, it almost feels like a completely different game. While it could be argued that Project 06 shouldn't be used as a replacement for the original game, a sentiment I'd also agree with, the fact remains that it's arguably the easiest way to access 06, and it's just a flat-out better version of the game, so it can retroactively paint the original game in a better light. This phenomenon isn't really that uncommon if you think about it. Just think about how many mods or fan projects there are that adjust things to either modernize or enhance their original games. You've got stuff like the PC ports of Mario 64 and the Nintendo 64 Zelda games, which are able to add features like widescreen, higher frame rates, and other quality of life additions. You could name almost any PC port that's available on Steam and find some kind of quality of life or HD mod pack available for it. For a Sonic example, just look at Sonic Adventure 1. If you ask most people what the best way to play that game is nowadays, they'll probably point you to the Steam version with the better SADX mod pack that aims to make the DX version more in line with the Dreamcast one. While it does work to achieve that goal and fixes some bugs, It also introduces a lot of quality of life features that are not present in either the original game or its re-release. Project Re-Rainbow for Sonic Colors Ultimate also comes to mind, a mod pack that basically remade the entirety of Colors to make it the port people wanted out of Ultimate. While most of these don't have as much of an effect on the games as Project 06 does to its base game counterpart, the end result is still similar. It gives you an experience oftentimes better than what you would get in the original versions of these games. There is no way to play the original Dreamcast version of Sonic Adventure above 30 FPS, so being able to play it at 60 with this mod pack on Steam is an objective improvement for most people, and would improve their experience with the game overall. I'm not saying this is a bad thing, mind you. I've used a lot of mod packs and fan projects like this myself. At the end of the day, play games however you want. However, my point is that especially in today's gaming climate, where remasters and remakes have primed people to look for the best possible version of a game, official or otherwise, the perception of a game becomes skewed as people gravitate toward the newest, best version of a game. Which is why I think it's fair to say Project 06 has helped 06's image, even if only by giving us a small glimpse into what the game might have played like if it was given more time in the oven. So with all that being said, where does that leave Sonic 06 in 2025? Well, what we're left with is this strange divide in how this game is perceived. Some people view this game as the lowest point in the series' history, a game that arguably is still affecting how the series is both developed and perceived to this day. To others, the game is this fun romp that, while not perfect, has a lot of fun and unique ideas that, for better or worse, set it apart from other games in the series, and to them still embodies a lot of what Sonic is and can be. These two viewpoints are inherently contradictory, but after thinking about it for a while, I don't know why they can't both be true. Looking into this topic got me thinking about what the most important factors are for a game's legacy. Should it be the impact of the game on the gaming landscape and its franchise, or should it be how much people enjoy the game, both at release and in a modern context? Take a game like Mario 64 for example. That game was the poster child for what a 3D platformer should look and play like for years, if not to this day. Yet if you ask somebody that grew up with the newer games in the series, like Galaxy or Odyssey, they might call 64 clunky or dated by comparison, completely unaware, or even uninterested, in the impact it had on gaming as a whole. Should that younger person's experience be invalidated because they came into the game with a different mindset than someone who played it back in the 90s? I believe it's entirely possible to separate a game from its historical impact, and judge it on its experience in a vacuum, and I believe this is where the big divide comes in for Sonic 06. For people who were following this series up to its release, and were able to see how it affected it in real time after the fact, it's hard to separate 06 from the fallout it had on the franchise, and rightfully so. The game had a huge impact on how the series is perceived, and resulted in a major shift in the series' direction. However, on the opposite end, you have people like me, people who grew up playing the game well after release and had no context to what the game meant for the wider franchise, or the various reactions surrounding it. That shouldn't invalidate all the criticism the game has gotten, or the effect it had on the series in general, but I also think it's interesting to think about the stuff this game did do right. The fact of the matter is, without this game and the decisions made during its development, Sonic would just flat out not be the same series it is right now. Whether that's a good thing or not, I can't say, because I don't live in that alternate timeline, but it's hard for me to imagine what the Sonic series would be like today without games like Secret Rings or Black Knight. Two games that just flat out wouldn't exist if Sega had done the smart thing and hadn't divided Sonic Team during 06's development. Despite the reaction to Sonic 06 at release, a lot of its ideas have been brought back a lot over the years. Silver and Blaze are still considered main Sonic characters that pop up every now and then. Crisis City and Kingdom Valley would go on to be brought back in Sonic and Shadow generations respectively, and those are some of my favorite levels in those games. Heck, the fan reaction to seeing Mephiles come back as a boss fight in Shadow Generations should go to show you just how much the game's reputation has changed over the years. I guess what I'm trying to get at is that doing this little thought exercise has made me more cognizant of other people's perspectives on games. Despite playing 06 a lot as a kid and being able to enjoy it more than most people nowadays, I can also recognize why it had the effect on the franchise it did. While I don't think I could in good conscience ever call it a good game, I would also be lying if I said I couldn't have any fun with it. It seems like such a simple conclusion, but it's sometimes easy to forget that people play and enjoy games differently. There's so many factors that can influence a person's experience with a game, whether that's prior expectations or the lack thereof, the things you've gone through or are going through in life, to the context of the franchise or gaming landscape when said game released. Games are inherently an interactive art form, so some games are going to jive with people more than others, And whether you enjoy or dislike a game, those perspectives should be just as valid. I found that a lot of gaming discourse has become so vitriolic over the years because people are so quick to write off others' opinions and experiences. That's not to say bias isn't a huge factor. And look, I'm a Sonic fan, I'm used to dogshit opinions. But I find that it's hard to have genuine discussions about a lot of games nowadays. It probably doesn't help that platforms like Twitter limit the word counts on posts, so it's hard to have a nuanced conversation. But I feel that now more than ever, if your opinion happens to differ from the public consensus, then you get dogpiled and labeled a bad actor. I'm not saying we have to entertain every opinion everyone has ever. Let's face it, some people hate on things just to be different. But it would be nice to be able to express an opinion on a game without immediately being eviscerated or written off for daring to have a different perspective. Even an opinion you fundamentally disagree with can have a seed of truth inside of it, and it might even help you notice something about the game you didn't before. Looking into all of these different opinions on Sonic 06 and playing through Project 06 again, I've come to appreciate a lot of what the base game set out to do. I still hesitate to call it a good game, but I can understand why someone who grew up with it would enjoy it. I would be lying if I said I didn't somewhat enjoy my time going back to it. I think it's awesome that people can find things to gush about in games that are otherwise bashed to hell and back. It's really easy to focus on the things you don't like in a piece of art, and hell, that's often rewarded in this modern landscape. But I think there's just as much, if not more value, in highlighting the things that a piece of art does well. The way talk around Sonic 06 has changed over the years is fascinating to me. What used to be the biggest boogeyman in the whole franchise is now a game that for some people embodies aspects of Sonic better than some of the newer games. It's gotten to the point where people are genuinely asking for an official Sonic 06 remake, which honestly isn't the worst idea if you ask me. The almost universal praise Project 06 has gotten should be enough to tell you that there's at least a good game worth salvaging underneath all the mess. Plus, with how much better Sonic has been doing as a brand recently, releasing a good 06 remake would do wonders for its brand image. Like, can you imagine the power move it would be if Sega took one of the most notoriously bad games ever released and actually finished it while polishing it up a bit to modern standards? I think that would truly solidify the redemption of Sonic's reputation in the eyes of the general public. Personally, I don't see it happening anytime soon. Maybe let's get 2 or 3 good games under our belt first. But hey, never say never, right? Sonic 06 is a game that I don't think will ever truly leave the public eye. For years, it was the laughingstock of both the general gaming public and Sonic fans alike. But underneath all the jank and glitches are a bunch of unique ideas that I would argue should get another chance to shine. And even if you can't see anything redeeming about Sonic 06 as a package, it can at least stand as a testament to how far the series has come since the mid-2000s. Look at it this way. Even with all the stuff Sonic 06 is notorious for, I think we can all agree that it's at least more interesting to talk about than Sonic Forces.
I'm Sonic! Sonic the Hedgehog!
I can handle this alone. You keep track of Mephiles.
My name is Silver. Your actions will condemn us all. The Iblis Trigger must die!
I'm afraid our little game ends now.
Whatever it is you want to do, you can do it alone. I determine my own destiny.
To kill someone to save the world, is that really the right thing to do?
Whether it's right or wrong, if we don't take this chance, the future will remain exactly as it is.
I don't care what happens to the world. If I had to choose between the world and Sonic, I would choose Sonic.
If the world chooses to become my enemy, I will fight like I always have.
This is the end! I will protect the future!
I'll release you from the chains of your past. This might even be a fair fight.
The present day! The here and now that you've stolen? Time to take it back!
Nothing starts until you take action. If you have time to worry, then run.